Travelers were put on notice today. You may not be able to board a plane next year unless you first make a stop at the DMV to get what's called a real ID. It's a new level of security in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, and transportation correspondent Chris Van Cleve tells us what the real ID is really about.
Starting October 2020 of next year, okay? You have to have the gold star on your ID. That way you be in compliance with the Real ID Act.
At airports across the U.S., TSA officers are breaking the news to flyers.
You have to have the gold star on your...
Many will need a round trip to the DMV before October 2020.
Not necessarily looking forward to the process.
Or they may not be able to fly. They'll need new Real IDs, a new secure driver's license that'll be required to access airport checkpoints and to enter federal buildings.
Developing tonight, did you know that your driver's license picture could be in a federal database right now? Apparently, a lot of other people, including lawmakers, had no idea either. It turns out federal agencies have been collecting that information to create a facial recognition database.
Well, it's very simple because law-abiding citizens like you and I all have driver's licenses, and we take those driver's license photos at a DMV. The state collects all of those in whichever state you're in, and they're held in a database. And apparently what's been happening without the consent of lawmakers, without the consent of those who have been photographed and those law-abiding citizens, the FBI is taking those photographs and they are searching, along with ICE, the DMV databases in 21 different states. Those states essentially allow the FBI to come in and look at them, and all it takes in many cases is a simple email from the FBI to a contact in that state to say, give me access to your database, and they begin searching thousands upon tens of thousands upon millions of photos.
Ms. Bulamwini, right now, Amazon can scan your face without your consent, all of our faces without our consent, and sell it to the government, all without our knowledge, correct?
Yes.
And, Mr. Chair, I'd like to seek unanimous consent on how Amazon actually met with ICE officials over facial recognition system that could identify immigrants. I'd like to submit this to the congressional record.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. Ms. Garvey, in fact, it's not just Amazon that's doing this, right? It's Facebook, it's Microsoft, it's a very large amount of tech corporations, correct?
That's correct.
And do you think it's fair to say that Americans are essentially being spied on and surveilled on a massive scale without their consent or knowledge?
I would make a bit of a distinction between what Facebook and other companies are doing, but yielding to Ms. Bulamwini for more specifics on this. I will say most of the law enforcement agency systems operate on DMV databases or mugshot databases, so information that has been collected by agencies rather than companies.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And Mr. Ferguson, one of the prime constitutional concerns about the non-consensual use of facial recognition technology is rooted or alluded to in the 14th Amendment, correct?
It's correct, it's one of them.
And right now, companies, governments, agencies can essentially steal or use your biometric data from you without your consent. And this is outrageous, right? Because this is America, and we have a right to privacy. Isn't that right, Ms. Coliani?
House lawmakers questioned Homeland Security officials at a hearing today over the department's use of facial recognition technology. Well, this follows reports that ICE and other agencies are using state driver databases for facial recognition searches to track undocumented immigrants. And some lawmakers believe that the use of the technology violates civil liberties. But officials today argue that the benefits of actually using this technology outweighs the concerns.
It gives us the ability to validate a person's biographical identity within 2 to 3 seconds without having to actually handle the physical passport. It allows us to link it up in a secure way. So the person we did all our national security checks against, and TSA is done their national security checks against on international flights, corresponds to the person who's in front of us.
And we did data collection on the number of people who were choosing not to provide biometric identification at our checkpoint, and it was less than 1%. People seem to enjoy it. The traveling public moves to the checkpoint very rapidly, and the best part of it is we enhance identity verification, thereby enhancing security.
More travelers are quickly finding out that their faces will soon replace passports and even state IDs. International airports around the world and even some here in the U.S. are rolling out facial recognition technology.
Hang on to your boarding pass.
The TSA is trying a facial recognition system it hopes will speed up lines while adding a layer of security. At LAX's International Terminal, the agency is testing a future where flyers won't need a boarding pass or an ID check to go through security.
The passenger experience is enhanced because you don't have to fumble through your belongings to pull out, multiple ID documents. You just walk up to the camera, pose for a photo, and you're off on your way.
The TSA says the images are not saved on the camera and are compared against a gallery of passport photos of people known to be flying that day to confirm the traveler's identity. During the pilot, passengers are not required to participate. The process takes as little as 2 seconds. A standard document check takes about 20.
I'm fine with it. I was just surprised by it.
The people that have nothing to hide, I think there would be, are all for it.
I'm not really concerned about my privacy.
Advocates have long warned about the day that facial recognition becomes commonplace in our streets, and that day appears to have
Facial
arrived.
surveillance may not be just for places around the world anymore. Now, a new report from Georgetown Law says it's growing here at home. The technology can pick you out in a crowd and follow you all in secret without you knowing. That's scary.
Well, a couple of things here. First of all, remember Lionel's Law. And one law is that the law always lags behind technology. The second Lionel's Law is that if you're reading about it in American mainstream media, it's 5 years old. It's already here. This is not like, Scotty, a disease like AIDS. We worried about this, and we're trying to stop it. Oh, no, it's here. And it's how do we deal with it? How do we, prepare for it? It's here. It's not going to be stopped.
Yeah, so I don't think the question is how powerful can it be in the hands of government. The question is, how powerful is it now in the hands of government? Because it's already in the hands of local police and federal police, federal entities. It's already there in terms of the surveillance infrastructure built out, private cameras, cameras owned by cities and municipalities stationed all around the country. And I like how you said the crack team at the New York Times. Look, if a group of Goombas at the New York Times can put together a facial recognition program using, public cameras and a $60 facial recognition piece of software and be able to identify people using, essentially the guy that they identified, by the way, a professor, they only had the side of his face in the shot and they were able to match it to a social LinkedIn profile. It's incredible how they were able to do it. It speaks volumes to the level of sophistication within the technology for facial recognition. Yeah. It also speaks volumes to the ability of anyone to be tracked anywhere they go at all times. Privacy is no more in our current surveillance state.
With all of the information that's being called, and by the way, facial recognition on your phone and elsewhere and iris scans, eventually governments are going to be able, and it's being done in China, to not only know where you are, but to know your emotions, to know your sexuality, to know your mental health, to know your illness, to know your propensities, and by the way, commercially, the way you look at things, the way you respond to certain items in stores. This is also a great way, and China's doing it already, to figure out where the dissidents are, what they're thinking, and how to keep an eye on them.
Well, I'm going to ask you, what's your problem with facial recognition?
It's not my problem. It's the Fourth Amendment's problem.
Which is?
This is surveillance, and surveillance requires a warrant. And if we get to the state of mass, suspicionless, warrantless surveillance, we'll have lost the rights that the Fourth Amendment was written to guarantee. And that's the right to be left alone and the right to prevent fishing expeditions. When the laws are written not to preserve, the audience doesn't like it. When the laws are written not to preserve liberty, but to make it easier for the cops to enforce the laws, that's called a police state.
Osama bin Laden, he's not dead, but we know exactly what he looks like, and he's walking down the street in San Francisco. Boom, he's picked up by facial recognition because we know exactly what the guy looks like, and so we've thrown him right there.
This is a real, realistic hypothetical, is it not?
It is very realistic. All kinds of murderers and kidnappers and terrorists are out there. We know what they look like.
If the police could break down every door and stop and question everybody they want, would we live in a safer environment? Probably, but who would want to live that way?
It's not a bad rejoinder there.
Thank you, young man.
This face opens doors, you know. Well, actually it doesn't, but it does unlock my phone. And if you do the same with your phone, then you will know that facial recognition is already pretty good. I mean, it's certainly not perfect, but it's not hard to imagine a world where your face is the key to everything. Facial recognition technology is primarily being driven towards security and surveillance. Even pop star Taylor Swift secretly deployed the technology to root out stalkers at a recent concert. In China, authorities use it to name and shame citizens. Even for minor offences like jaywalking, faces are broadcast on billboards. In Beijing, the technology is even used to stop people from stealing rolls of paper from public toilets. And it's recently been revealed that the Chinese authorities are using the biometric technology to keep track of the movements of individuals from the persecuted Uyghur Muslim minority. It's a worrying example of how facial recognition can be abused to profile and track a minority group.